Would it be possible to write a skateboarding novel? And if so, what would it look like? Let's talk about it. Welcome back to Rad Rat Video, a channel about skateboarding in all of its forms. I like to answer questions that you guys have about skateboarding and a million different topics. I'm always surprised by the kinds of things that you guys send in. You can send in your own by going to radratvideo.com. But let's talk about today's. The first one is from Casey, who says, hello, 30-year-old here who hasn't skated in probably at least 6 years, was thinking about getting a board just to mess around with for fun. Unfortunately, all the shops within an hour of me are gone or temporarily closed. Was hoping you could give some possible suggestions on hardware brands, as I don't want the cheap, useless stuff, but also can't bring myself to buy all the stuff I used to if the usage is going to be minimal. Probably just going to use for flat ground unless I'm out somewhere for work that has a park with some small ramps. Okay. Well, I would really prefer that instead of you buying something cheap, you would buy something good that's used. I think that's a better option. So as far as where to get stuff, there are a lot of online skate shops. If you skated when you were a kid, you might remember the CCS catalogs that they used to send. They're about this big, and like once a quarter they would send you the little brochure, the magazine you could flip through. That came back for a while. They used to send them to me, and I haven't gotten them. I don't know if they still send the print versions, but the site is up. There's a lot of sites like that where you can buy skate stuff. But I would recommend against not buying anything from Target or Walmart. There's a Tony Hawk brand. There's the Dark Star complete set are there. But I've gone to the stores. I felt that the trucks feel really cheap. They feel like they're going to fall apart. The wheels feel more like plastic than a normal skate wheel is supposed to. I don't recommend getting that stuff. Instead of buying brand new junk that's going to break, I would buy used pro stuff if it's if you are trying to save money. So I'll go on Facebook Marketplace, something like that, and see if you could find a skateboard there. If you can buy a pro board and the trucks are good and the wheels and bearings are good and the deck is old, you've at least saved some money doing it that way. So that's probably the way I would go if you're trying to save money. But I would not buy from like a department store or anything like that. The next question is from C Money, who says, I've discussed this before with my friends at length. I've recently seen debate online about it. Wanted to know your input on the matter. If someone is skating a ledge or rail, does a 270 shove it into a nose slide or a board slide? Is this a big spin front board or nose, or a shove it front board or nose? Clearly the answer is big spin, right? But people argue that it's a shove, and I think it's heresy. I would agree with you, because it's more clear if you say big spin versus 360 shove it or 270 shove it. I would say 360, but if you say 360 shove it, no slide, I would assume you approached backside and spun the board backside. So you came this way, board did a 270 this way, you spun the opposite way 90, so the board has done 360 compared to you, and you landed in the no slide. 360 shove it, no slide. But a big spin no slide, if you come front side, spin back side, 270 shove it, 90 body varial into it, it's the same as a big spin because the board only spins half compared to you. Like they're both 270, but one way it's a 360 and one way it's a 180. So big spin front nose. Plus it sounds better. Like, why rob yourself of that? Why say shove it front nose? You could say big spin nose slide and it's obvious what you mean, and it sounds better. Of course it's big spin. Some people would argue, I have heard the argument that you would have to do it to fakie for it to be a big spin. So like it's a shove it front nose if you land it to regular, and a big spin front nose if you do it to fakie. No. Okay. The next question is from Jimbo, who says, over the years, I've noticed skateboarding has a sort of universal language only skaters understand. Well, maybe some debate if you watched the last question. If I say a big flip back 5-0 big spin out on a quarter in public, some people might probably think I belong in an institution. Furthermore, the actual words tend to be the same across all languages. Kickflip is called a kickflip in many different countries. They don't take their word for kick and flip and put them together. It's just a kickflip anywhere you go. All right. So my question is, why are other sports not like this? A basketball jump shot isn't called that everywhere, nor is a football quarterback. Well, for a quarterback to be translated, it'd have to be played somewhere where they don't speak English. These words are called different things in different languages. Why is skateboarding like its own universal language, and why aren't other sports like this? Skateboarding is very new compared to most sports. By the time skateboarding became popular, there were ways to communicate between countries very easily. You could subscribe to Thrasher and live in England, or, I mean, there was their own stuff there too, but like, it was a more international community at the time. So when the pros from an English-speaking country would come to you in France or wherever else, you'd hear all the trick names. There'd be an announcer or something like that. Like, it wasn't the early 1900s. It wasn't the 1850s. Like, these things that all developed in one place. So it doesn't feel more like a sport to me. It feels like a programming language. Like, if you want to learn how to program and your native language is not English, you're going to have to learn some words in English, because you have to use, if, end if, select. You have to use words that are in English. Like, you might be able to translate them, but then you can't search for it and find answers, because no one's going to know what you mean unless they're also from that country and also choose to do that. So if you're going to learn how to talk about programming, you have to learn English words. Of course, programming, you can't just read it. It's not as hard as learning how to program is hard, but learning the English parts of it wouldn't be as hard, because it's only a few words. But still, like, they're in English because they were developed in English, and it's a computer program. It's the same anywhere in the world. You don't have to translate code. So there was no reason to ever do that. So I think it's more similar to that, just because it's so modern and so current. It's only been the last few decades, really, that's why, as opposed to other kinds of sports. That's my thoughts on that. Oh, I was thinking about French. So French is the only language I've ever discussed skateboarding in that wasn't English. And there are a few differences. Like, they'll often not say kickflip, they'll just say flip, because that's like the default flip. If the board flipped, it's probably a kickflip, so you just say flip. And instead of 360 flip, if they type it out, they won't say 360. They'll say 3-6, because you would pronounce it like trois six. I think that's how they pronounce it. I've only seen it written, but it is a lot quicker to say. But that said, if I said 360 flip and they replied with that, like, we would both understand each other. So I think that's pretty cool. Okay, next question is from Patrick, who says, I just watched Gonz's part in Video Days, and I wonder what you think of Gonz's level in skating in the early 90s versus pro level nowadays. While pros these days do insanely more tech tricks, Gonz had a unique style, and there's no question about the difficulty of some of the tricks he pulled off. Interesting to hear your thoughts. Yeah, that was the kind of part when I first started skating that I would have fallen asleep during. Like, yeah, he does a couple handrails, he does a couple gaps, he does some weird grinds on curbs, snooze. He's not doing any late flips, he's not doing any weird, crazy, the type of stuff that I was impressed by when I first started. But I think that once you learn enough about skating and you get to really understand what's going on in that part, it ages well. Like, it really shows how much of a connoisseur you have become when you can watch that part and really see all of the different things that are going on. He does everything in that part. He skates vert in that part. He does gaps that no one had ever done before. He does a handrail that was named after him because of that. And he does all this really weird stuff on curbs and stuff like that. And the thing that I kept thinking about as I watched it, because I just rewatched it when you asked the question, is how he would always do like the opposite and weird version of stuff. So, like, it used to be in street, when street was very new, you would just try to do something on that. And it would be the easiest thing. You would do a board slide, or you would do a 50-50, or you would do like a no comply over a curb. You would just do something and you're trying to skate the spot. Well, this is like evolving to a point where you're trying to do things that are more difficult on purpose, like the hard way. Like, you wouldn't just do a board slide. You would start fakie and you do like fakie backside board slide and then pop over the opposite side. Why? Because it's harder. or I'm going to spin this way instead of that way, or spin and then land on the wrong truck, you know, like he did the ollie over, you know, like a lip slide, but too far into the switch feeble. All that kind of stuff was new, and just doing things that are the hard way on purpose. Like, I think that was kind of a new thing at the time, and that he was doing everything in the biggest gaps, stuff that still holds up in some cases, is incredibly impressive, especially for the time. I think that was 91. So yeah, that's a great part. And if you are interested in skateboarding history and heritage, you definitely need to see that part and really consider the time period, you know, that it was in, and watch some other stuff from around that time. And you'll see how brightly that part shines compared to other stuff. All right. The last question is from Pedro, who says, why hasn't skateboarding and books come together yet? There have been lots of biographies, history of the sport type books, but no one has written a story and then put it in a book to sell it. It's happened with movies, games, TV shows, but not novels, comics, and written media. Why do you think it's lacking in that sense? Is there a skateboarding book I'm missing? If you had to write a skate book, what would it be about? So yeah, like you said, there have been books about like pro skaters' lives, you know, and things like that. There was a trick tip book that I've seen before. But I think the reason why you can't really see a skateboarding book, you said comic, I think you could do a comic, but that would be tough too, because you have to draw like the sequences to understand skateboarding. That's the hard part. If you were to write a book and try to talk about tricks, you'd have to describe everything, because you can't assume somebody coming in is just going to be able to see names and understand it, you know? And so like in that big moment at the end when you're about to win the contest and the skater drops in switch, you have to be like, well, he was feeling confident, so he put his left foot down on the tail, and that means that he was going to drop in switch, and switch is when it's backwards. It's almost like doing everything left-handed. Like, you'd have to describe what everything was. He did a heel flip by using the tip of his heel to propel the board forward in a, you know, I don't think you could do that and have skateboarding be like the main part of the book. But I have been reading a lot of books lately, and so I watch people on, you know, talk about stuff on my one screen all day, and I've been watching people talk about books and reviewing all the new books and reviewing stuff that I've read before and all this kind of stuff. And I stumbled on this channel where she will read like the top 25 books for this year or something like that, and one book, or one of her lists that she did, this whole video was like the hottest, steamiest books of the year, and she had to rate if they were actually good or not. And one thing that I learned from that is that lots of books are about a guy who's in the mafia, and he's like the main love interest for the main character. It's like a whole subgenre of like hot and steamy romance books about guys who are in the mafia. I had no idea that this was the case, but it's apparently, I've only watched a few videos and it's come up many times. Like, that's a big deal in romance books. So you could do a romance book with a skater, okay? And so the actual nuts and bolts of how the skateboarding works doesn't really matter. You could describe a couple of tricks, but it wouldn't be page after page of just talking about like how a trick works. And you could have the moment where he gets hurt and she has to help patch him up, and the time when he got caught jumping that fence and she bails him out of jail and he's mad, and, you know, like all that kind of stuff that would be in like a mafia romance book. I can't imagine exactly what's in there, but I have a pretty good idea, I think. You could do all that stuff. Like, you could have a skateboarder be a main character in a book, but it would have to be a romance book, and it would have to not really be about skateboarding. That's the only thing that I could come up with. A comic book could be a little bit better, but you would still have to draw very detailed how all the tricks worked, or no one's going to be impressed. Oh, we did a heel flip instead of a kick flip this time. No one's going to care in a comic book. So, yeah, that is my thought on that. I think that could be interesting. If you know of a romance book with skateboarding in it, let me know. I've never read one before, But if it had a skateboarding main character, I would like to read that. And if I do, I would like to talk about it on the channel, because I'm sure it'll be awful. But that's it for now. If you have any better ideas, leave them in the comments. If you have questions, go to radratvideo.com and you can submit them there. You can also submit them through Patreon. You can also help the channel out by sponsoring me there, and you can join on YouTube to help out there too. So that's it for now. I will see you next time. Thanks for hanging out.